Thank the member for Melbourne. The question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the member for Dobell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to support the Fair Work Amendment Bill of 2014. It's important to recognise that this bill will deliver key aspects of this government's policy that was endorsed by the Australian people at the September election. This government is delivering on its election commitments, and through the Fair Work Amendment Bill of 2014, we are further restoring balance to our workplace relations system. And we'll do this by improving the process for the negotiation of greenfields agreements to ensure that agreements are not frustrated by unions pursuing unsustainable claims and forcing delays, threatening investment and delaying the commencement of major new projects crucial to our prosperity. Restoring union workplace access rules reflecting those in place prior to Labor's union-friendly amendments and dealing with excessive right of entry visits by union officials. Improving workplace productivity and flexibility by enhancing the scope for employees to make individual flexibility arrangements that meet their genuine needs as determined by those employees, and closing the strike first, talk later loophole in the good faith bargaining rules which Labor refused to address. In 2007, the previous Labor government promised a fair and balanced workplace relations system that would guarantee necessary protections to employees, whilst allowing employers the necessary flexibility required to operate viable and sustainable businesses. Unfortunately, what we saw from Labor was a resetting of the workplace relations pendulum in favour of the union movement. This decision effectively applied a handbrake to the Australian economy. Labor made a promise prior to the election and delivered something entirely different while in government. This is in stark contrast to this government, which is getting on the job of building a stronger economy so that everyone can get ahead, including our commitment to a more balanced and fair workplace relations system. The amendments presented in this bill will provide a more balanced workplace relations system whilst safeguarding workers' conditions and protections. The Fair Work Amendment Bill of 2014 is good for jobs, good for workers, good for employers and good for the economy. Labor's economic and workplace relations management since 2007 saw the slowest wage growth on record dating back to 1997. The ABS Wage Price Index reflected a mere 2.6% growth in wages in 2013, so low that it slipped below the inflation rate as measured by the ABS Consumer Price Index. This means a moderation in living standards, a decline in employment and falling real net national disposable income per capita. Now, these figures illustrate the need to have a flexible workplace relations system adaptable to the economic challenges present across the economy. Now, Australian CEOs across the mining, manufacturing, services and construction sectors have stated concerns about the flexibility of industrial relations as a growth to impediment in 2014. This bill will provide clarity and certainty for employees around the use of individual flexibility arrangements. Individual flexibility arrangements, in theory, are an important tool introduced by the former government with the intent of enabling workers and their employers to mutually agree on conditions that suit their needs while ensuring that employees are better off overall compared to their underpinning employment instrument. Individual flexibility arrangements should be central to a workplace relations system that supports the varying employment needs of workers in a modern economy. By example, individual flexibility arrangements should be a real alternative workplace agreement that enables employees to manage their childcare or other caring arrangements, to spend time with family or for other commitments. These arrangements are specific to the individual and not designed as a management tool for business. Importantly for the employee, an employer cannot force an employee to sign an individual flexibility arrangement or make it a condition of employment. The employee must be better off overall than they would have been under the applicable modern award or enterprise agreement. And a worker must provide a statement to the employer stating that the individual flexibility arrangement meets their genuine needs and that they are better off overall. Now, under the current Fair Work system, unions are able to restrict the scope of flexibility terms under enterprise agreements to only cover a single matter, for example, the taking of leave. This means that workers may be denied the opportunity to have individual flexibility arrangements on other matters, even if they and their employer agree to more suitable arrangements. Under the former Labor government, we saw the potential benefits of individual flexibility arrangements traded away for the priorities of union officials and union bosses. There has been widespread calls from business and industry supporting a return to flexibility in the workplace. Now, in my electorate of Dobell, the unemployment rate of 6.88% sits above the national average, and faced with even high youth unemployment figures and a low workforce participation, we need the option of flexibility arrangements to encourage workforce participation. There is a great manufacturing business in Dobell that has had issues with union right of entry, and this is a business that's compliant with the law, which has an agreed and established area for union officials and visits, and despite not being a unionised workforce. They are also a lean business dealing with 3 major customers, and the 3 major customers are big players and they have significant market share. And they demand suppliers run lean, efficient and productive business operations. However, this has been exploited by the union officials, akin to the lunchroom invasion, with 16 visits in 12 months to the non-unionised workforce. And the principal reason for the visits was recruitment for the union bosses. The main line from the union official was that only through the union could every worker get an additional $14. Now, this local Dobell business has a great employee culture of safety, performance and productivity amongst the 140 staff. And the hard-working staff quickly came to the realisation that $14 across 140 staff was going to very quickly make that lean and efficient business not so productive, and impact on their combined ability to deliver a competitive product to demanding customers on tight margins. Now, this is a perfect example of the right of entry provisions being exploited by union bosses for their own benefit under more broken promises from the Labor Party. The amendments before the House will deliver on the promises made by Labor in 2007 and ensure that workers have access to fair flexibility without veto by union bosses and union officials. This bill will address the current imbalance in union workplace access rules, and our changes will fairly and sensibly balance the right of employees to be represented in the workplace if they wish to be, with the right of employers to go about their business without unnecessary disruption. The former Labor government opened the door for the union movement into Australian businesses, resulting in 523,700 working days lost due to industrial action in the last 3 years alone. Labor made no attempt to implement any recommendations to reduce such action. Under Labor's policies, we saw a devastating loss of productivity across the Australian workforce, primarily as a result of 2 policy failures: right of entry provisions and the strike first, talk later loophole. Now, this government sees right of entry as a specific statutory privilege to which conditions ought to apply. Regrettably, some union bosses do not. This bill will amend these provisions insofar as the ability for unions to enter a workplace is either tied to a union's recognised representative role at the workplace or employees at the workplace having requested the union's presence. Furthermore, a union will only be entitled to enter a workplace for discussion purposes if 1. They are covered by an enterprise agreement, or 2. They have been invited by a member or employee they are entitled to represent. The changes proposed by this bill will enact Labor's publicly stated promise prior to the 2011, another promise broken. The bill also removes the strike first, talk later loophole under the Fair Work Act. Then opposition leader Kevin Rudd stated in 2007 that industrial disputes are serious. They hurt workers, they hurt businesses, they can hurt families and communities, and they certainly hurt the economy. Mr Rudd further stated, employees will not be able to strike unless there has been genuine good faith bargaining. However, once again Labor failed the policy test. implementing a workplace relations framework whereby employees are allowed to strike before bargaining has commenced. This is why in 3 years we have seen 523,700 working days lost due to industrial action. This amendment will mean that industrial action cannot be the first step in the bargaining process, therefore restoring a balanced and harmonious approach to enterprise bargaining. The bill also seeks to make amendments to the Greenfields provisions in order to help unlock new investment and prevent needless delays to new projects. The Australian Industry Group rightly highlighted in 2012 that unions currently have too much power to refuse to enter into a Greenfields agreement for a new project unless all their demands are met. These amendments seek to provide confidence and certainty to investors and to ensure that Australians benefit from the prosperity generated by new projects. And this will strongly signal to investors that Australia is open to business. This bill also implements other recommendations from the Fair Work Act review, a review undertaken by the now Leader of the Opposition, including removing inconsistency that currently exists by allowing employees in some jurisdictions to accrue or take leave whilst absent from work whilst receiving workers' compensation benefits, restoring the long-standing position that employees are only entitled to annual leave loading when their employment ends, where it is expressly provided for in their award or workplace agreement, and the introduction of the requirement that an employer must give an employee who has requested to extend their unpaid parental leave a reasonable opportunity to discuss the request unless the employer has already agreed to the request. The measures outlined in this bill deliver on key aspects of our election policy, and we must look at restoring fairness and flexibility to the workplace to support new job growth. The test for the Labor Party is whether they will support measures outlined in the Fair Work Amendment Bill of 2014 to lead to a more productive workplace relations framework, increased jobs and higher real wage growth. They now have a chance to atone for their broken promises by supporting the measures in this bill, the same measures that they outlined and committed to in 2007. This bill implements the Coalition's publicly stated election policy, nothing more, nothing less. This government released its workplace relations policy well before the 2013 election to address the aforementioned problems within the Fair Work laws. The measures in this bill will help encourage investment in new projects that are important to the Australian economy by preventing unions from vetoing Greenfields agreements. Industrial action will be reined in by ensuring that the bargaining must have commenced before strike action can be taken, reducing unnecessary losses in productivity and working days lost. And we will restore much-needed flexibility to the workplace through improvements to individual flexibility arrangements, which will lead to increased productivity and fairness. Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House and call on members opposite to support its measures.
I thank the member.